What is that smell?
Dr. Edmund Harrington stopped mid-sentence. His nose wrinkled. 600 people turned to look. A 12-year-old black boy stood at the back of the auditorium. Joseph Bradley. Second-hand clothes. A hand-stitched backpack. Harrington pointed straight at him.
You, black boy. This is a mathematics competition, not a homeless shelter.
Joseph's voice was barely a whisper.
Sir, I'm registered. I just want to compete.
Compete?
Harrington laughed.
With what? That thick skull?
He tapped his own head.
God gave your kind strong backs, not strong brains. Know your place.
Scattered laughter. A few gasps.
Now get out before you stink up my auditorium.
Joseph didn't move. His hands shook, but his feet stayed planted. What happened next? No one satisfying that satisfying. Let me tell you where this story takes place. Northwestern University, Lunt Hall, the mathematics department. A building filled with portraits of great thinkers, all of them white. All of them are men. The hallways smelled like old books and money. Every year, this building hosted the Midwest Young Scholars Mathematics Invitational, 32 years running, the most prestigious math competition for middle school students in the region. And in 32 years, not a single winner had come from a public school. Not one. Every champion came from private academies, prep schools with tuition higher than most families' annual income. The competition was simple. Solve problems, beat your opponents, win the prize. But the real rules? Those were unwritten, and everyone knew them. Rule 1, dress the part. Rule 2, speak the part. Rule 3, look the part. Joseph Bradley broke all three. Now let me tell you about Dr. Edmund Harrington, because understanding him is important. Harrington wasn't just some random professor. He was a legend. Published over 200 papers, nominated for the Fields Medal, the Nobel Prize of Mathematics. He had taught at Northwestern for 50 years. The competition itself was his creation. But his greatest achievement? A problem he wrote as a young doctoral student, the Harrington partition problem. A puzzle about numbers and patterns that had defeated every mathematician who attempted it. For 50 years, the best minds in the world had tried. All of them failed. Harrington wore that failure like a crown. The unsolvable problem proved his genius. If no one could crack it, that meant he had created something perfect. He believed in talent, but only a certain kind. Talent that came from proper breeding, proper schools, proper families. In his mind, greatness required cultivation, like a rare flower that only grows in expensive soil. A black child from the south side of Chicago? That wasn't a flower. That was a weed. Now let me tell you about Joseph. He lived with his grandmother, Mrs. Delphine Bradley, in a public housing project. 2 rooms, thin walls, neighbors who fought at night. His mother had died when he was 6. His father was never in the picture. Mrs. Bradley was 71 years old, a former school teacher. She raised Joseph on Social Security checks and prayer. Every night she told him the same thing. God gave you a gift, baby. Don't let anyone tell you different. The gift? Numbers. Joseph saw patterns everywhere. In the cracks on the ceiling, in the rhythm of raindrops, in the way pigeons gathered on power lines. His brain worked differently. Mathematics wasn't something he learned, it was something he breathed. But there was no money for private tutors, no money for prep school. So Joseph taught himself. Every day after school, he walked 40 minutes to the Harold Washington Library. He read textbooks meant for college students. He watched lectures on YouTube. He filled notebook after notebook with equations. By age 12, he had taught himself calculus, linear algebra, number theory, all from library books and free videos. But none of that mattered in Lunt Hall, because when people looked at Yosef, they didn't see a genius. They saw a poor black boy in cheap clothes. Now, the competition. $25,000. That was the prize for first place. $25,000. For most families, that was a nice bonus. For Yosef's grandmother, it was survival. Mrs. Bradley was sick. Diabetes, heart problems. The medical bills kept piling up. She had sold her car to pay for Yosef's registration fee. $50 they couldn't afford. You win that money, she told him, and don't you worry about nothing else. Yosef had nodded. He didn't tell her he was scared. He didn't tell her about the nightmares. He just hugged her and promised he would try. So here he was, standing in an auditorium full of wealthy white kids, being told to leave by the most powerful man in the room. The competition was live-streamed. Local news cameras lined the walls. 600 people sat in the audience. And at home, on a borrowed tablet, Mrs. Bradley watched her grandson get humiliated in front of the world. But Yosef didn't leave. He reached into his backpack, pulled out a crumpled registration form, and held it up for everyone to see. "Sir," he said quietly, "I'm registered. I have the right to compete." Harrington's smile disappeared. The room went silent. What would he do now? The registration form trembled in Yosef's hand, but he held it high. Harrington stared at it like it was garbage. "Where did you get that?" "Online, sir. I paid the $50 fee." Harrington snatched the paper. His eyes scanned it. His jaw tightened. The form was legitimate. Every box checked, every signature in place. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Harrington crumpled the paper into a ball. "Anyone can fill out a form," he said. "That doesn't mean you belong here." He turned to a young woman at the registration desk, a graduate student named Claire. "This competition has standards. We don't let just anyone walk in off the street." He glanced back at Yosef, "Especially not from the street." Claire hesitated. "Professor, technically his registration is valid. The rules say—" "I wrote the rules," Harrington cut her off. "And I say we test him first." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was new. There was no preliminary test in the official guidelines. Harrington walked to the main stage. He picked up a piece of chalk. On the massive blackboard behind him, he wrote an equation. Long, complex, full of symbols that made the other students squint. "Every competitor must prove they deserve to be here," Harrington announced. "This is the qualifying problem. Solve it in 5 minutes, and you may stay." He looked directly at Yosef. "Fail, and you leave. Quietly, without making a scene." Yosef stared at the board. The equation was from advanced number theory, modular arithmetic. Partition functions. Material taught to graduate students, not middle schoolers. This was a trap. Everyone knew it. Cameron Wells, a 13-year-old from the most expensive prep school in Chicago, leaned over to his friend. $5 says he can't even read it. His friend laughed. "I give him 30 seconds before he cries." Yosef walked toward the stage. Each step felt heavy. 600 pairs of eyes followed him. He picked up the chalk. It felt small in his sweating palm. Harrington checked his watch. "Your 5 minutes start now." Yosef looked at the equation. His mind began to work. At first, nothing, just panic. The symbols blurred together. His heart pounded so loud he could hear it in his ears. Then, slowly, the patterns emerged. He had seen something like this before, in a library book. Chapter 7, a theorem about prime distributions. He started writing, one line, then another. His handwriting was messy, but his logic was clean. Harrington watched with crossed arms. His smirk faded slightly. 2 minutes passed. 3. Yosef stopped. He stared at what he had written. Something was wrong. Not with his work, with the problem itself. He turned to Harrington. "Sir? What, giving up already?" "No, sir." Yosef's voice was steady now. "There's an error in the problem." Silence. Harrington's face went red. "Excuse me?" "The constraint set. It allows 2 conditions that contradict each other." Yosef pointed at the board. "This equation isn't hard to solve. It's impossible to solve, because it's wrong." Gasps from the audience. Cameron Wells stopped laughing. Claire, the graduate student, leaned forward. Her eyes widened. Harrington took a step toward Yosef. His voice dropped low. Dangerous. "Are you saying I made a mistake?" Yosef didn't blink. "I'm saying the math has a mistake. Whether you made it or not, I don't know." For 3 long seconds, no one moved. Then Harrington smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a new way to destroy someone. "Interesting theory," he said softly. "Let's see you prove it." He handed Yosef a fresh piece of chalk. "Show us all how smart you really are." Yosef took the chalk. His hand wasn't shaking anymore. Something had shifted inside him. The fear was still there, but it had moved to the background. Now there was only math. He turned to face the blackboard. 600 people watched. Cameras recorded. His grandmother prayed. And Yosef began to write. "The problem asks us to find all integers that satisfy this partition constraint," he said. His voice was quiet but clear. "But look at the second condition." He circled a section of the equation. "This says the sum must be greater than n squared. But the first condition says each element must be less than n. If every element is less than n, and we have exactly n elements, then the maximum possible sum is n times n minus 1. He wrote the calculation beside it. N times n minus 1 is always less than n squared, always, for any positive integer. He drew an arrow connecting the 2 conditions. So the problem asks for a sum that's bigger than n squared, but the constraints make it impossible to ever reach n squared. These 2 conditions can never be true at the same time. Murmurs spread through the auditorium. Claire, the graduate student, grabbed her notebook. She was checking his work. Her pencil moved fast. Yosef continued. "This isn't a hard problem. It's a broken problem. Like asking someone to find a number that's bigger than 10 and smaller than 5 at the same time. It doesn't exist." He set down the chalk. "That's the error." Silence. Then Claire stood up. "He's right." Every head turned toward her. Her face was pale. "I just checked. The conditions contradict each other. This problem has no solution because it can't have a solution. It's internally inconsistent." More murmurs, louder now. Cameron Wells looked confused. He turned to his friend. "Wait, so the professor messed up?" His friend didn't answer. He was too busy staring at Yosef. Dr. Victor Stanton, a visiting mathematician from MIT, leaned forward in his seat. He had been watching quietly from the third row. Now his eyes were sharp, focused. "Interesting," he muttered to himself. "Very interesting." But Harrington didn't move. He stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. The room waited for his response. Finally, he spoke. "Clever," he said. "Very clever." His tone was calm. Too calm. "You found a technicality, a small inconsistency, perhaps a typo in my notes." He shrugged. "It happens. Mathematics is precise work. Even experts make minor errors." He picked up an eraser, wiped away part of the equation, rewrote it. "There. Fixed. Now solve the corrected version." Joseph looked at the new equation. The contradiction was gone, but the problem was still advanced, still graduate-level material. He had maybe 30 seconds of his 5 minutes left. "Sir, I only have—" "Then you'd better work fast." Joseph turned back to the board. His mind raced. The new problem was solvable, but it required a technique he had only read about once. A method involving generating functions and recursive sequences. He closed his eyes. Where had he seen it? Which book? Which chapter? The library. 6 months ago. A rainy Tuesday. A thick blue textbook with a torn cover. Page 217. His eyes snapped open. He wrote. The first line established the base case. The second line set up the recursion. The third line identified the pattern. His chalk flew across the board. Numbers and symbols poured out of him like water. 4 lines, 5, 6. He reached the final step, a summation formula. He simplified it, factored it, and wrote the answer. Then he stopped. He turned around. Done. The room was dead silent. Claire checked her notebook again. Her hands were shaking now. It's correct. Dr. Stanton stood up. He walked closer to the board. His eyes traced every line. Not just correct, he said slowly. Elegant. This solution uses a technique most graduate students struggle with, and he did it in under a minute. He turned to look at Joseph. Where did you learn this? The library, sir. Harold Washington Library. There's a blue textbook on combinatorics, chapter 12. Stanton stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Remarkable. The audience began to whisper. Some looked impressed. Others looked uncomfortable. A few prep school parents shifted in their seats. But Harrington? His face was stone. He walked toward Joseph, slowly, deliberately. He stopped just inches away. You found one error, he said quietly. So quietly that only Joseph could hear. Don't think that makes you special. Joseph met his eyes. I don't think I'm special, sir. I just want to compete. Harrington held his gaze for a long moment. Then he turned to the registration desk. Mark him as qualified, he said. His voice was flat. Probationary status. Claire frowned. Professor, probationary status is for students with incomplete paperwork. His registration is complete. Probationary status, Harrington repeated. My competition, my rules. He walked back to his seat at the judge's table. He didn't look at Joseph again. But Joseph didn't care about status. He didn't care about rules. He was in. He walked back to the competitors section. The other students moved aside to let him pass. Some stared. Some whispered. Cameron Wells watched him with narrowed eyes. Yosef found an empty seat in the back corner. He sat down, he placed his backpack on his lap, and for the first time that day, he allowed himself to breathe. But this was only the beginning, because Harrington wasn't finished. Not even close. The qualifier had been a test, a small one. The real challenges were coming, and they would be much, much harder. What would Harrington throw at him next? The competition began. Round 1. All competitors solving problems at the same time. 50 students hunched over desks, pencils scratching, pages turning. The problems were hard. Calculus, geometry, logic puzzles that twisted your brain into knots. Yosef finished first. He raised his hand. A proctor collected his paper. The other students looked up. Some are confused. Some are annoyed. Cameron Wells glanced at his own half-finished work, then back at Yosef. His jaw tightened. Lucky guess, he muttered. But it wasn't luck, and deep down, Cameron knew it. The judges reviewed Yosef's answers. Every single one is correct. But they spent 20 minutes examining his work, checking for errors, looking for reasons to disqualify him. They found nothing. Unconventional notation, one judge commented, but mathematically sound. Harrington said nothing. He just made a note in his folder. Round 2, head-to-head elimination. Yosef versus Cameron Wells, the prep school prince against the library kid. The problem involved graph theory, networks of points connected by lines. Find the shortest path that visits every point exactly once. Cameron attacked it with brute force. He tried every possible combination. His paper was filled with calculations. Sweat formed on his forehead. Yosef stared at the problem. He didn't write anything for 30 seconds. Cameron smirked. What's wrong? Too hard for the street corner? Yosef ignored him. His eyes moved across the page, seeing something no one else could see. Then he picked up his pencil. He drew 3 lines, wrote one equation, circled the answer, done. The proctor blinked. Already? Yosef nodded. Cameron was still calculating when the time ran out. He hadn't finished. The judges checked Yosef's work. Correct. He identified a symmetry in the graph that reduced the problem to a simple formula. Dr. Stanton smiled slightly. That's not something you learn in textbooks. That's pure intuition. Cameron slammed his pencil down. This is ridiculous. He's cheating somehow. Mr. Wells, Dr. Stanton's voice was calm but firm. There is no cheating in mathematics. Either the answer is right or it's wrong. His answer is right. Cameron's father, a man in an expensive suit, stood up from the audience. I want a formal review. My son has been preparing for this competition for 3 years. There's no way some random kid from the ghetto... Sit down, Mr. Wells, Dr. Lorraine Ashford spoke for the first time. She was the dean of the mathematics department, a black woman in her late 50s, calm, measured, powerful in her own quiet way. Your son lost fairly. The competition continues. Mr. Wells turned red, but he sat down. Harrington watched the exchange with cold eyes. He said nothing, but his pen moved across his notepad. Writing, planning. Round 3, the semifinals. New rules. Competitors must explain their solutions verbally, out loud, in front of everyone. This was designed to favor private school kids, students trained in debate, public speaking, The art of sounding smart. Yosef had never spoken in front of more than 10 people in his life. His opponent was a girl named Elizabeth Thornton, blonde hair, perfect posture, daughter of a federal judge. The problem was complex, differential equations. Elizabeth solved it correctly. Then she explained her solution like she was giving a TED talk. Confident, polished. Every word is precise. The judges nodded approvingly. Then it was Yosef's turn. He solved the problem, also correct. But when he tried to explain it, his voice cracked. So you take the derivative, and then... He paused, swallowed, started again. The function has a critical point where... His sentences were short, choppy. He avoided eye contact. Elizabeth smirked. But he didn't stop. He pushed through, word by word, step by step. And when he finished, the logic was flawless. Dr. Stanton leaned back in his chair. The presentation needs work, but the mathematics is perfect. Harrington finally spoke. Presentation is part of mathematics. How you communicate your ideas matters. A brilliant solution explained poorly is worthless. He looked at the other judges. I recommend we penalize for clarity. Dr. Ashford shook her head. We're judging mathematical ability, not elocution. Then perhaps we should change the criteria. The criteria are set, Edmund. They have been for 32 years. Harrington's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue further. Not yet. Yosef advanced to the finals. The live stream chat exploded with comments. Who is this kid? Southside genius? Harrington looks like he swallowed a lemon, LMAO. This is insane. A library kid beating prep school robots? The audience buzzed. Something was happening here, something unexpected, and everyone could feel it. But the finals were still ahead, and Harrington was about to play his final card. What would he do to stop Yosef? 2 hours until the final round. The auditorium emptied for a break. Students scattered. Some went to the cafeteria. Some called their parents. Some huddled with private tutors for last-minute coaching. Yosef had no tutor, no parents to call, no money for the cafeteria. He found a quiet corner in the library wing of Lunt Hall, a small room with old wooden chairs and dusty shelves. He sat on the floor, pulled out his worn notebooks, and began to review. His notebooks were his treasure. 3 years of work, equations copied from library books, problems solved at midnight under a dim lamp, theories he had taught himself when no one else would teach him. He flipped through the pages. His handwriting had changed over the years, from messy and uncertain to sharp and confident. But today his hands were shaking again. The final round. Against students who had been groomed for this their entire lives. With judges who didn't want him there. And a professor who was looking for any reason to destroy him. Focus, he whispered to himself. Just focus on the math. A door creaked open. Yosef looked up. Dr. Lorraine Ashford stood in the doorway. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him. Sitting on the floor, notebooks spread around him like a protective circle. Then she stepped inside, closed the door behind her. You shouldn't be in here, she said. This area is for faculty only. Yosef started gathering his things. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'll leave. I didn't say leave. She pulled a chair closer to him, sat down. I said you shouldn't be in here. There's a difference. Yosef froze, unsure what to do. Dr. Ashford studied him for a moment. You know what I see when I look at you? Yosef shook his head. I see myself. 45 years ago, different city, Same story. She paused. I was the only black girl in my mathematics program. They told me I didn't belong, told me I was taking a spot from someone more deserving, told me to go home. What did you do? I stayed. I fought. I became the dean. A small smile crossed her face. And now I get to decide who belongs and who doesn't. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a granola bar, placed it in his hand. You need to eat. The final round is going to be brutal. Yosef looked at the granola bar. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since breakfast, a bowl of oatmeal his grandmother had made before dawn. Thank you, he said quietly. Dr. Ashford stood up, walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Edmund Harrington is not a stupid man. He knows you're talented. That's why he's afraid of you. She looked back at him. Don't let him see you're afraid too. She left. Yosef unwrapped the granola bar, took a bite, let the sweetness settle on his tongue. Then he went back to work. 45 minutes until the final round. Yosef's phone buzzed. A text from his grandmother. How's it going, baby? He wanted to tell her everything. The humiliation, the challenges, the small victories. But his phone battery was at 3%. He typed quickly. I'm in the finals. Pray for me. Send. The screen went black. Dead. He stared at the dark phone. His only connection to home. Gone. For a moment, the loneliness hit him like a wave. He was alone here, completely alone, surrounded by people who wanted him to fail. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. Focus, just focus on the math. 30 minutes until the final round. The competitors' waiting area was tense. 3 other finalists sat at separate tables, all from prep schools, all with coaches whispering in their ears. Elizabeth Thornton reviewed flashcards with her father. He pointed at each card. She answered without hesitation. Another finalist, a boy named Preston Clark, worked through practice problems with a private tutor who charged $500 an hour. The third finalist had withdrawn, walked out during the break. The pressure was too much. That left 4. Elizabeth, Preston, a quiet girl named Victoria Nash, and Yosef. Cameron Wells approached Yosef's corner. He stood over him, arms crossed, face twisted with contempt. You got lucky, Cameron said. That's all this is, luck. Yosef didn't look up from his notebook. Round 2 wasn't luck. I saw the symmetry. You didn't. Cameron's face reddened. You think you're smart? You think you're better than us? He leaned closer. You're nothing. You're a charity case, a feel-good story for the news cameras. But when this is over, you'll go back to your rats and your roaches and your pathetic little life, and nobody will remember your name. Yosef finally looked up. His eyes were calm, steady. Maybe, he said. But right now, I'm in the finals, and you're not. Cameron's hands balled into fists. For a second, it looked like he might throw a punch. Then a proctor appeared. Mr. Wells, spectators are not allowed in the competitor's area. Return to your seat. Cameron shot Yosef one last look. Pure hatred. Then he walked away. Yosef's hands were trembling, but he didn't let it show. 10 minutes until the final round. The finalists were escorted to the main auditorium. The audience had grown. Word had spread. Local news had called in extra cameras. 600 seats were full. People stood in the aisles. More watched online. The live stream counter showed 50,000 viewers. Yosef walked past the crowd. He heard whispers. That's him, the the library kid. I heard he taught himself calculus at 9. No way, that's impossible. Look at him. He looks so young. He doesn't stand a chance against Elizabeth. She's been training for years. Yosef kept walking, eyes forward, chin up. He took his place at the competitors' table, front row, center stage. The judges sat behind a long wooden desk. Dr. Stanton, Dr. Ashford, 2 other professors, and Harrington, in the middle, the head judge. He was smiling. Not a kind smile, not a welcoming smile. The smile of a man who knew something no one else knew. A large screen behind the judges flickered to life. The words appeared. Final round. Problem selected by Dr. Edmund Harrington. The audience murmured. Elizabeth looked confident. Preston looked nervous. Victoria looked sick. Yosef looked at Harrington. Harrington looked back. And in that moment, Yosef understood. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to be fair. At home, on a borrowed tablet, Mrs. Delphine Bradley watched the live stream. Her hands gripped her rosary. Her lips moved in silent prayer. "Show them, baby," she whispered. "Show them what God put in your mind." The screen changed. The final problem appeared, and everyone in the auditorium gasped. What did Harrington choose? The equation filled the entire screen. Dense, complex, terrifying. But it wasn't just any equation. At the bottom of the screen, in small letters, were the words, "The Harrington partition problem, unsolved, 50 years." The audience erupted. Is he serious? That's his own problem. No one has ever solved that. This is insane. Dr. Ashford stood up. Her voice cut through the noise. "Edmund, what is this?" Harrington spread his hands. Innocent, reasonable. "This year we raise the bar. Our young scholars claim to be exceptional. Let's see how exceptional they truly are." This problem has defeated professional mathematicians for 5 decades. You're asking children to attempt it? I'm asking them to try. Harrington smiled. Isn't that what education is about? Reaching for the impossible? Dr. Stanton shook his head slowly. This isn't a test. This is an execution. Then let them withdraw. Harrington gestured at the finalists. Anyone who feels overwhelmed is free to leave. No shame, no penalty. He looked directly at Yosef. Some of us know our limits. Others need to learn them. The message was clear. This problem was chosen for one reason: to destroy Yosef publicly. Preston Clark stood up immediately. His face was pale. I withdraw. He walked off the stage. His tutor followed, already making excuses to his parents. Victoria Nash lasted 10 seconds longer. Then she withdrew too. That left Elizabeth Thornton and Yosef Bradley. Elizabeth stared at the screen. Her confidence had cracked. Her father gestured frantically from the audience, but she couldn't read his signals. She looked at Harrington, then on to the problem, then at her shaking hands. She swallowed. I'll try. But her voice said she had already given up. Yosef hadn't moved. He stared at the equation. The Harrington partition problem. 50 years unsolved. The life's work of a man who hated him. Every mathematician who had attempted this problem had failed. Professors, researchers, genius minds from every corner of the world. And now it was placed in front of a 12-year-old boy from public housing. A trap. An impossible trap. The logical move was to withdraw, preserve his dignity, walk away before the humiliation. But Yosef thought about his grandmother, her medical bills, The $50 she had sacrificed, the pride in her voice when she told him to show them. He thought about every person who had told him he didn't belong, every door that had been closed in his face, every time someone had looked at his skin and decided he was worthless. He picked up his chalk. "I'll try too." Harrington's smile widened. "Then let's begin." The clock started. 60 minutes. Could Joseph do what hundreds of professional mathematicians could not? 20 minutes passed. Elizabeth Thornton had written 3 lines, then stopped. She stared at her paper. Her pencil hadn't moved in 10 minutes. Joseph's board was covered with equations. His chalk flew across the surface. Numbers, symbols, arrows connecting ideas. He was attacking the problem from every angle he knew. Partition functions, generating sequences, modular constraints. The audience watched in silence. Even the whispers had stopped. Dr. Stanton leaned forward. His eyes traced Joseph's work. "He's trying the recursive approach," he murmured. "Bold choice." Harrington sat back, calm, patient, like a man watching a mouse walk into a trap. 30 minutes passed. Joseph stopped. He stared at his work. His eyes moved from line to line, checking, rechecking. Something was wrong. His recursive approach had led to a contradiction, a dead end. The path he had been building collapsed in on itself. His heart sank. He picked up the eraser, wiped away everything, the entire board. Blank again. Gasps from the audience. He erased it all. What is he doing? He's lost. Cameron Wells leaned over to his father. "Told you, library math." Laughter rippled through the prep school section. Joseph stood frozen. His mind was racing. But for the first time, nothing came. No patterns, no insights, just static. 40 minutes passed. Elizabeth had given up. She sat with her head in her hands. Her paper was blank except for her name. Joseph had started again. A new approach, different technique. But this one was failing too. He could feel it. The walls are closing in. The solution slipping further away. His chalk broke in his hand. He stared at the pieces on the floor. The audience began to murmur. Poor kid. He tried his best. It was never possible. Harrington set him up. Harrington glanced at his watch. 20 minutes left. His smile was barely contained. Joseph's shoulders slumped. For the first time, doubt crept in. Real doubt. The kind that tells you to stop fighting. The kind that whispers you were foolish to try. Maybe they were right. Maybe he didn't belong here. Maybe a boy from public housing had no business challenging a problem that defeated the best minds in the world. He looked toward the exit. 3 steps. That's all it would take. 3 steps, and this nightmare would be over. His feet didn't move. But his eyes drifted across the audience, searching for something, anything. And then he saw it. A student in the front row, wearing a faded t-shirt. On the shirt was a fractal pattern, a simple design, triangles nested inside triangles, each layer a smaller copy of the whole. Self-similarity. Joseph's breath caught. A memory surfaced. 3 years ago, a rainy Tuesday at the library, a thick book with a torn blue cover. Chapter on prime factorization. He had noticed something strange that day, a pattern in how primes distributed themselves. It had seemed random at first, but when he looked closer, there was a hidden structure, a symmetry, He had written it down in his notebook, page 47, then forgotten about it. Until now. His eyes snapped back to the board. What if everyone had been approaching this problem wrong? What if they had been starting from the top and working down, complex to simple? What if the answer required the opposite, simple to complex, building from the smallest case, letting the pattern reveal itself? His hand moved before his mind caught up. He grabbed a fresh piece of chalk. At the back of the auditorium, Dr. Ashford watched. She had seen that look before, the look of someone who had found something. She gave a single nod, almost imperceptible, but Yosef caught it, and something shifted inside him. The doubt didn't disappear, but it moved aside, made room for something else. Determination. He had 15 minutes left. 15 minutes to do what no one had done in 50 years. He started writing. Would it be enough? Yosef started from the beginning. Not the beginning of the problem, the beginning of mathematics itself. He wrote the number 1, then 2, then 3. The audience frowned. What was he doing? This was a graduate-level partition problem. Why was he writing numbers a child could count? But Yosef wasn't counting. He was building. The problem asks about partitions of any integer, he said quietly, almost to himself. Everyone tries to prove it for all numbers at once. But what if we start with the smallest cases first? He drew a simple diagram, 3 dots arranged in a triangle. For 1, there's only one partition, the number itself. He added more dots, connected them with lines. For 2, there are 2 partitions, 2 itself, or 1 plus 1. For 3, there are 3 partitions, 3, 2 plus 1, or 1 plus 1 plus 1. His chalk moved faster now, but look at the pattern. He circled specific connections in his diagram. Each partition contains smaller partitions inside it, like mirrors reflecting mirrors. The structure is recursive, self-similar. Dr. Stanton sat up straighter. His eyes widened. My God, he whispered. He's mapping it visually. Yosef continued building. His diagrams grew more complex, but they remained clear. Each layer nested inside the previous one, triangles within triangles, patterns within patterns, just like the fractal on the student's t-shirt. 10 minutes left. The reason no one solved this, Yosef said, is because they treated it as an algebraic problem. They tried to force it into equations. But it's not algebraic, it's geometric. He drew a large triangle, divided it into smaller triangles, divided those into smaller ones still. The partitions map onto a fractal structure, and fractals have a special property. They're self-similar at every scale, which means he wrote a new equation. Short, elegant. If the pattern holds for the small cases, it must hold for all cases, because the large cases are just combinations of the small ones. He turned to face the judges. That's the insight everyone missed. They were looking at the ocean. They needed to judge and look at the drops. 5 minutes left. Yosef's chalk flew across the board. He was writing the formal proof now, translating his visual insight into mathematical language. Lemma, theorem, corollary. Each step built on the previous one. Each line followed logically from the last. The audience had gone completely silent. Even the GJ seemed to hold their breath. Elizabeth Thornton watched with her mouth open. She had stopped crying. Now she was just staring. Cameron Wells gripped the armrests of his seat. His knuckles were white. Dr. Ashford's hands were clasped in front of her face. Praying? Hoping? Impossible to tell. And Harrington? Harrington had stopped smiling. His eyes moved across the board, following Yosef's work, checking each step, looking for errors, finding none. His face grew pale. 2 minutes left. Yosef reached the final section of his proof, the induction step. If the pattern holds for n, it must hold for n plus 1. He set up the hypothesis, established the base case, showed the recursive relationship. Then he wrote the final line, QED, the Latin abbreviation that every mathematician knows. Quod erat demonstrandum, that which was to be demonstrated. Proof complete. He set down the chalk, turned around, faced the audience. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then Dr. Victor Stanton rose to his feet. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence, everyone heard it. It's correct. He walked toward the board. His eyes traced every line, every symbol, every connection. It's not just correct, he said, louder now. It's elegant. It's beautiful. He found a solution that hundreds of professional mathematicians missed for 50 years. And he did it with triangles. He turned to face Harrington. Edmund, your problem is solved. Harrington didn't move. His face was frozen. That's not possible. I'm looking at the proof right now. It's rigorous, it's complete. Every step is valid. Harrington stood up, walked to the board. His hands trembled slightly as he traced the equations. The recursion, he muttered. The self-similarity. It's obvious once you see it. He turned to look at Yosef, really look at him for the first time. How did you see it? His voice cracked. 50 years. The best minds in the world. How did a child see what we couldn't? Yosef's answer was quiet, calm. I didn't have anyone to tell me it was impossible, sir. I just followed the numbers where they wanted to go. Silence. Then the auditorium exploded. Applause, cheering, screaming. 600 people on their feet. The sound was deafening. It washed over Yosef like a wave. He didn't know what to do, how to react. He had never heard applause before. Not for him. Students were shouting, cameras were flashing. The live stream chat scrolled so fast it became a blur. He did it! History right here! That kid is a legend! Harrington's face am dead. Dr. Ashford was crying. She didn't try to hide it. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clapped. Dr. Stanton shook his head in disbelief. A smile spread across his face. Remarkable, he kept saying. Absolutely remarkable. Elizabeth Thornton walked over to Yosef. Her eyes were red, but she extended her hand. I've never seen anything like that. Congratulations. Yosef shook her hand. Thank you. I mean it. You deserve this. Cameron Wells stayed in his seat. He didn't clap, didn't move, just stared at the board with empty eyes. His father had already left, too ashamed to stay. And at home, on a borrowed tablet with a cracked screen, Mrs. Delphine Bradley pressed her hands to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. That's my baby, she whispered. That's my grandbaby. On stage, Yosef stood alone. The noise surrounded him. The lights blazed down. Hundreds of strangers cheered his name. But in his mind, he was back in the library. Rainy Tuesday. Torn blue book. Page 217. He had found the pattern that day. And today, he proved it to the world. But the story wasn't over yet, because Harrington was still standing there, and the look on his face said this wasn't finished. What would happen next? The applause faded. Dr. Ashford stepped forward. She raised her hand for silence. Before we proceed to the award ceremony, there is a matter we must address. She pulled up a document on the main screen, the competition rulebook. According to our records, Joseph Bradley was registered under probationary status. She glanced at Harrington. A status typically reserved for students with incomplete paperwork, which was not the case here. Harrington shifted in his seat. Under Article 7 of the competition bylaws, Dr. Ashford continued, solutions submitted by probationary participants are classified as unofficial. They do not count toward rankings or prizes. The audience murmured. Confusion. Anger. Wait, so he doesn't win? That's insane. He just solved a 50-year-old problem. Joseph felt his stomach drop. After everything, after all of it, they were going to take this away too. Harrington straightened his tie. A small smile returned to his face. Rules are rules, he said calmly. I don't make them. I simply enforce them. Actually, Edmund, Dr. Stanton stood up, you did make them. You wrote Article 7 yourself in 1994. He walked to the center of the stage. But here's the thing. If Northwestern refuses to recognize this proof because of a bureaucratic technicality, MIT will. We'll publish it under his name tomorrow. The Joseph Bradley solution to the Harrington partition problem. He looked at Harrington. Your problem. His name. Forever. The audience erupted again. Cheers, laughter. Someone shouted, "Get wrecked!" Harrington's face went white. The live stream had 70,000 viewers now. Donors were watching, board members, the university president. His legacy, his reputation, his life's work, all of it hanging by a thread. He had no choice. He stood up slowly, walked to the microphone. Each step is heavy. The committee, he paused, swallowed. The committee recognizes Joseph Bradley as the winner of the 32nd Midwest Young Scholars Mathematics Invitational. Another pause, longer this time. And as the solver of the Harrington partition problem. He couldn't say, my problem, but everyone heard what he didn't say. The room exploded once more, but there was one more surprise waiting. What had Dr. Ashford been planning all along? The cameras kept flashing, reporters pushed forward, microphones appeared from every direction. Joseph, how does it feel? Did you know you could solve it? What's next for you? Joseph didn't answer. He couldn't. The noise was overwhelming. Then a hand touched his shoulder. Dr. Ashford stood beside him. She guided him away from the crowd, toward a quiet corner backstage. She reached into her jacket, pulled out an envelope. The scholarship, she said. $25,000. First place. Joseph took the envelope. His hands trembled. There's something else. Dr. Ashford's voice softened. I made some calls this morning, before the final round. Your grandmother's hospital. Her medical bills. Joseph looked up. They've been addressed. A donor who wishes to remain anonymous. The balance is 0. The envelope slipped from his fingers. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "You earned this," Dr. Ashford said. "All of it. Don't let anyone tell you different." The tears came before he could stop them. A door opened behind them. A familiar voice. "Baby?" Yosef spun around. Mrs. Delphine Bradley stood in the doorway. Dr. Ashford had arranged a car to bring her. She was wearing her Sunday dress, the one she saved for special occasions. Yosef ran to her. She caught him in her arms, held him tight, the way she had held him since he was small. "You did it, baby," she whispered. "Your mama's watching from heaven, and she's so proud." Yosef buried his face in her shoulder. He was 12 years old, a genius, a history maker, and right now he was just a boy, holding his grandmother, finally safe. If you've ever been in a room where nobody believed in you, where they decided who you were before you opened your mouth, remember this story. The numbers don't care. The truth doesn't care. And neither should you. If this moved you, leave a comment. Tell me about a time you proved someone wrong. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe.